What is up, and welcome to CFB Saturdays. Today, I'm looking at the Big 12 and ranking the teams from worst to best going into the 2026-2027 season. I've been doing the same thing with the Big 10 and the SEC. I'll be doing the same thing with the ACC next time. But for now, sit back, relax, like, comment, subscribe, and just enjoy the video. Starting at the very bottom, at number 16, I have Iowa State. And the Cyclones have enjoyed unprecedented success under Matt Campbell the past few years, but he left for Penn State, and he took most of the productive players with him, leaving Iowa State pretty high and dry. So this year is the definition of a rebuild year for incoming head coach Jimmy Rogers. He's from Washington State. He had a lot of success whenever he was at the FCS level with South Dakota State, even winning an FCS national title in 2023. He spent last year coaching Washington State, where they did about as good as you can expect from a year one coach there. The problem is that Iowa State just does not have the players anymore. This is not a place where you can just reload when your head coach takes all the best players with him to another school. I do like the quarterback they have in Jalen Raynor from Arkansas State, although he has an interception problem, and there is not a ton of talent around him to make him look better. The wide receiver room and the O-line look fine, I guess, but nothing really jumps out to me as exciting. I don't really like what I'm seeing out of the running back room either, and even at Washington State, Jimmy Rogers didn't have this much turnover even then. Washington State ended up going from the 17th team in the country on offense down to the 107th. So that can be attributed to quarterback poaching last few years or whatever else, but still, that does not give me a lot of confidence that Rogers is elevating this offense in year one. And the defense is more the same. The line looks fine. The linebackers should be good enough. But again, the talent drop off is massive from a defense that really already wasn't that incredible to begin with, even under Matt Campbell. There is potential, but there's a lot of inexperience and unproven guys that really don't excite me at almost every level of this defense. Just in a really unfortunate situation for Rodgers and the Cyclones. Most of the Big 12 feels like it improved, but Iowa State, in my opinion, got significantly worse. I would be genuinely shocked if they feel that a team that has a winning season, there's just way too much to replace and not enough resources to get the necessary talent to backfill. At number 15, I have Colorado. And the buzz and hype around Colorado has cooled down quite a bit since Deion Sanders first got there. The Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter years were fun, but without them, Colorado has returned to being a bottom of the barrel program within this conference. But will that trend continue this year? We'll see. Starting with the good, I do like Julian Lewis at quarterback a lot. I think he has a lot of upside. Obviously, a lot of high-level programs wanted him. I think he will be a bright spot for the Buffs, especially with this change in offensive scheme to the go-go offense. I think that will cover up some of the weaknesses the offense has, but how much can it cover up? Because there are some serious weaknesses or questions at the very least. They lost some really key pieces, and I just don't trust what they have in the trenches. I don't trust what they can produce on the ground. I mean, they do have Richard Young, who was a former five-star from Alabama, and they have some guys who came over with the OC from Sacramento State that are familiar with the go-go system, but I just don't see a standout star. And I think the O-line being what it is will make it really tough to find success on the ground. They did bring in some really good receivers, though, through the transfer portal, which is a room that Colorado has been pretty good for the past few years. I think that they will benefit from having this go-go system. Definitely keeping an eye on Danny Scudero, who led FBS in receiving yards last season. And on defense, they got some interesting guys like Boo Carter, who is a freak show athlete, but did have some culture issues at Tennessee. He can absolutely get things done on the field. He's going to be a key for defensive success for the Buffs, along with the linebacker room that I actually really like. Outside of that, though, there are a lot of holes in this defense. I do not love what they have on the line. It's basically an entirely new unit. I think they lack depth, and even the major talent they have up front, I think they lack as well in the starters. And I think that a lot of the secondary is not what it needs to be. As we get further into this transfer portal era, I noticed that taking the twos and threes that didn't get much playing time on top rosters doesn't usually pan out as well as expected. It's usually those guys that are starting on lower end teams that are just ultra efficient. And I feel like Colorado's transfers seem a little more dependent on what could have been rather than what is. They're taking guys that feel more like bust than unrealized potential, but that's just a personal feel for me. I could be completely wrong on that. But at the end of the day, I'm not really impressed with what Colorado's offense is from a roster perspective, but I do think that the go-go system will make things very interesting, and again, may cover up some of those weaknesses and allow them to win more games until the defense figures out how to adjust. They are not going to beat the better teams in their conference, but I do think that the uniqueness of this offensive style could give defenses fits. At number 14, I have UCF, and it feels like forever since Scott Frost took UCF to an undefeated season. He had a disappointing stint with the Cornhuskers, and now he's back in Orlando. But year one was not impressive to me, and honestly, I just don't know if he has what it takes to coach at the Power 4 level. That aside, he brought in a lot of transfers to elevate the offense that was towards the bottom of the conference last season. They got a pretty big upgrade at quarterback in Alonzo Burnett from James Madison. I think Barnett has a very similar skill set to what we've seen work for Scott Frost, which is promising. And, he's a very exciting dual threat guy. But the weapons that he has around him are a mystery. It's not like UCF lost a ton of great talent, so maybe it's not the worst thing that they have so many transfers taking over. They do have some returning guys in the receiving room, but they do lack size. I have questions about the running back room as well. They will need to get better and get more out of the O-line. I have some concerns about their depth there. They also need to get better at third down. They'll need to push the ball down the field better. They'll need to, pass the ball better in general to find any kind of success. So again, this is a completely transfer-infused offensive overhaul, and I'm not really sure how it's going to play out. Luckily, the defense has a lot more returning than the offense. The transfer portal was used more as a depth piece than anything else. They returned one of the top defensive backfields in the Big 12, so that's nice. They returned 4 of their 5 starters in the secondary, and they have some really strong tackles and linebackers. But I struggle to see how they are going to replace Malachi Lawrence in the pass rush that he generated alone. I'm also concerned about their ability to generate turnovers and play well on the road. Overall, I like what they have on defense, and I think that what they brought in an exciting quarterback is nice, but I just don't see that the offense is going to be all that much better with Scott Frost. I just don't trust the offense. I don't trust Scott Frost as a head coach. Moving on at number 13, I have West Virginia. And I knew last year was not going to be the immediate turnaround that many West Virginia fans had hoped for when they brought in Rich Rod. But I think this year he does have some pieces that he could put together a pretty nice offense. They bring in Michael Hawkins at quarterback, who started for Oklahoma when Jackson Arnold got benched a few years ago. And he had decent success there. So I could definitely see him having success here in Morgantown. They got Cam Cook from Jacksonville State, who I think was a pretty underrated pickup. He should be a huge addition to that backfield. But for things to work out, the offensive line is going to need to be better. And there isn't a whole lot of reason to believe that it will be. And there isn't a lot of returning talent either, so there may be a little too much reliance on transfer portal players to hit and have chemistry. If they get talent acquisition right, this could be a massively upgraded team, but if not, the floor could fall out from under them. And defensively, that's never been a strong suit. Defense has never been a strong suit for Rich Rod. I don't really expect to see it shine this year either. The pass rush is about the only part of this unit that I actually have faith in. Outside of that, pretty much everyone has to be replaced, and I don't really think that they have knocked it out of the park in the transfer portal to do that. I don't love the secondary or the linebackers, so West Virginia is really going to have to rely on that high-flying offense to win some shootouts. That's about what I expected to see out of Rich Rod, but with so much new incoming, there is just too much variability to put them any higher. At number 12, I have Kansas. Kansas has had a few disappointing seasons, but I still think that Lance Leipold is one of the best coaches in the conference, so I trust that he can get things rolling with the right pieces. He brought back Cannibal Kotonuki, who spent last year at Penn State trying to fix their offense, and there are definitely some pieces that he has to work with here, but the loss of star quarterback Jalen Daniels is really tough. The program has really relied on Daniels the past few years, so it'll be interesting to see what the Jayhawks look like without him. They do have a few interesting quarterback options, but I don't think any of them are really all that exciting, nor do I think that they can fill the shoes that Daniels is leaving, but I do really like some of the pieces they brought in, like Dylan Edwards from Kansas State at running back. He got banged up last season pretty early, and a lot of people forgot what he is capable of. But before he got banged up, he was one of, if not the best running backs in the conference. So if he stays healthy, he can absolutely make a difference for this team. And I think that the receiving core is going to be better as well. What concerns me most is quarterback play, health, turnovers, and a patched-together O-line. The defense doesn't provide a lot of confidence either. They were pretty rough last season. They are throwing a ton of transfers at the defense to make fixes, but I'm not overly optimistic that will pan out. There is some hope with the additions up front and in the linebacker room, but the safeties, they're going to be fine at best, and I'm really concerned about the secondary, especially at corner. And I feel like Kansas will continue to struggle with takeaways. Overall, though, Lance Leipold can do a lot with a little, and there are some things to really like. I could see Kansas exceeding expectations, but defense gives me pause, as does the quarterback room and the offense really as a whole. At number 11, I have Baylor, and Baylor had one of the most dangerous offenses in the country last season, but no defense to back it up. Will that be the same this year? We'll see. I will say the trend does not look good for head coach Dave Aranda after having 3 of his last 4 seasons being losing seasons, but they do bring in quarterback DJ Lagway from Florida. He was supposed to break out for the Gators, but just never lived up to that potential. If he unlocks that at Baylor, he could be an upgrade even over Sawyer Robertson, who I think has pretty big shoes to fill. But if we see the same version of him that we did at Florida, be prepared for some head scratching moments, lots of turnovers, and holding onto the ball entirely way too long. If Lagway does not shine at Baylor, which I honestly don't think he will, it's not for the Bears' lack of surrounding talent. They brought in some transfer receivers that should mean that Lagway has plenty of pass catching weapons. The run game will likely take the backseat again, but at least Lagway provides mobility himself if need be, and there should be some solid backs for when Baylor does need to run. As I hinted earlier, though, turnovers are a huge concern in my opinion. They have been plaguing Baylor a lot, which kind of just comes with the territory of playing the style of ball that Baylor does, but it's not like they are bringing in a more consistent guy. Like I mentioned, Lagway is pretty turnover prone himself, and the O line was pretty rough last season, so most of that front is being replaced. We'll see how they pan out and how they gel, but I don't have a lot of confidence in that unit. Defensively, Baylor has been pretty bad at stopping really anything. This year, I expect more of the same, to be honest. The line should be, I guess, a little bit stronger, but I'm still expecting them to have a pretty lackluster unit with plenty of holes in the secondary in particular. The Baylor offense last season felt like it needed to score on every drive to win, and I think that will be a pretty similar boat this season, but not quite as dramatic. Overall, like I said, I don't have a lot of faith in Lagway. It's true that he has the high upside, but I just don't think he's going to unlock it at Baylor. I think that they will be pretty disappointed in the turnovers and the lack of scoring output needed to keep up in high-scoring games when their defense is as lackluster as I think that it will be. Moving on at number 10, I have Cincinnati, and they improved all of the last 3 years, but it seems like with the improvement around the country and within the Big 12 and the loss of players that Cincinnati has, it's going to be pretty difficult for them to improve this season. Speaking of losses, the big name going out is Brendan Sorsby at quarterback. It will, I'll get into that a lot more later on in this video when I talk about Texas Tech, which will be, spoiler alert, much higher up. But there was a reason that he was one of the hottest players in the portal this offseason. He was very explosive. He had a very high ceiling. And when he was hot, Cincinnati was on fire. Losing him definitely hurts for the Bearcats. And the guy they brought in Georgia Southern, J.C. French, does not have that same kind of upside, to be honest. But what people seem to forget is how hot and cold Cincinnati's offense was under Sorsby. Like I said, Sorsby was hot. When he was hot, he was on fire and electric. But when he was cold, he was stone cold. Lots of 3-and-outs, disappointing drives because Sorsby was always looking for that next big play, the explosive play, the splashy play. J.C. French is not that kind of quarterback. We should expect a lot more in the medium game, and we'll probably expect less 3-and-outs, more consistent drives, but less explosiveness. I definitely think overall, though, losing Sorsby is definitely a downgrade, but there is at least a silver lining here. As for the rest of the backfield, the Bearcats have a really solid rotation of running backs led by the returner Zion Johnson. Their wide receiver room should be sneaky good as well. They brought in some portal guys I really like in Cade Wolford from Kent State and J.V. Gibson from Oklahoma, among others. It should be a very deep room as well, so there's a lot to like, but Cincinnati needs to be able to manage time of possession better. They need to be able to show up against the better teams in their conference, and J.C. French is going to have to be the guy that makes that all happen. If the best case scenario happens where the offense does make all those changes, a lot less pressure will be put on the defense, which I think is actually more important than the roster changes that are actually being made on that side of the ball. If they are on the field less, they will produce a better performance, period. But odds are the perfect scenario is not going to happen because that's just not how Scott Satterfield runs his offenses. So the defense is going to have to carry a lot heavier weight. I am concerned about their ability to stop the run, but I am even more concerned about their ability to get sacks and get takeaways. If the portal additions like Ty Goodwill can help generate turnovers, and if someone steps up on the edge to generate those sacks, that will go a long way. They portaled in some guys to help with that. They beat the D-line, which should help. But like I said, Cincinnati is going to be putting a lot of pressure on their defense. And overall, I think Cincinnati made a lot of roster improvements on the surface, but so did pretty much everybody else in the conference. And with the loss of their quarterback, Brendan Sorsby, it feels like a lot of those transfers are going to have to hit to make up for that one loss. If they can find more consistency, they can really soar, but that is, in my opinion, a pretty tough ask for Cincinnati. At number 9, I have TCU, and people seem to forget that TCU played for a national championship just a few years ago and have won more games than anyone else in the Big 12 over the past 4 years. Sonny Dykes is a heck of a head coach, and he knows how to win, and I trust him to do so here. Sure, TCU does lose Josh Hoover at quarterback, who I was higher on than most people. He will be a really hard guy to replace, but there is a lot of buzz around the new quarterback they got from Harvard and Jaden Craig, and he will hopefully be a lot less turnover prone than Hoover was. It seems like he will pair up really nicely with the incoming OC from UConn, who had the Huskies sitting at the number one in the country when it comes to fewest turnovers. So it seems like the offensive approach for the Horned Frogs this year is going to be shifting away from that air raid, high risk, high reward offense to a more slow paced and running back centric offense. Luckily for TCU, they did bring in some running backs to help with that change. Leading rusher Jeremy Payne is back, and there are some incoming transfers that I think should help give that ground game a boost. And it's not like TCU doesn't have any receivers either. They did lose Eric McAllister, who was their top guy, but the whole room, I think, was upgraded, which, again, I think will fit the new system quite nicely. My main concern is the O-line, though. When you run a specific system for so long, it can be hard to switch to the complete opposite. This TCU front was built for pass protection and high tempo, not this slow pound the rock style of ball game that they're trying to play now. They could really struggle with that transition, but I think it will turn out to be a more successful system for the Horned Frogs in the long run. Luckily, they didn't lose too much up front, and they maintained some pretty good consistency here with some talented players. And I really do trust Sonny Dykes when it comes to offense, so I think that he can lead a pretty smooth offense transition like this. But on the other side is the defense, and when they were playing high scoring, high tempo offense, it was okay that the defense wasn't amazing. But if they switch this around to a more complementary style ball where the offense is slow, methodical, and ground heavy, they're going to need the defense to step up and make more stops, because when you play that slow style of ball, points are just less frequent, and they have to replace a lot of their good players on defense, most notably Bud Clark in the secondary. Nobody on the current roster has the capabilities that he had, so losing him is really tough. And I'm not really super thrilled about the linebackers they have to replace either. I still think the secondary is in a good place. I like the safeties, but without Bud Clark, it's hard to see them taking a step forward, but I am optimistic about what they have up front at least. Overall, I think this is a less talented TCU team than we saw last year, but probably a more consistent one with less turnovers. I think that the offensive transition will not be an immediate success, but again, I think it will lead to a brighter future. While I'm not expecting another 9-win season, I do still expect TCU will be a solid unit this season. Number 8, I have Oklahoma State. And if you took a top tier G5 team and placed them in the Big 12 right now, how do you think they would do? Because that's essentially what's happening here with Oklahoma State. The entire Mean Green from North Texas, staff and roster included, is basically now playing in orange and black in Stillwater. That's right. Mike Gundy is out. Eric Morse is in, and he brought everyone over from North Texas, which was the number one offense in America last season. We saw Curt Cignetti do the same thing when he brought those players from James Madison to Indiana, and obviously it worked for him. So Eric Morse is now trying to do the same thing. And it feels like regardless of how it pans out, it can't get worse for the Cowboys. Since week 4 of the 2024 season, the program lost 20 straight games to FBS schools, with only one break being their win against UT Martin to start last season. Suffice it to say, things were not going well for the Cowboys before Morris got there. Respect to Mike Gundy and all that he did for OSU, but his time was definitely up, and it should only be up from here. Among the players coming over from North Texas is quarterback Drew Messamaker. He was a super massive story last season. He went from not even starting at quarterback in high school to being one of the most prolific college quarterbacks in the game. Dude is a complete maniac, and he can sling the rock like nobody's business. And the backup quarterback, Caleb Hawkins, he came with him, providing some really nice depth to the position, because Hawkins is actually really good as well. They also have a running back that's coming back, I can't say his last name, Adeyi. Again, you can make fun of me, but he had almost 2,500 yards last season and 17 touchdowns. So the backfield is very promising. And basically the entire wide receiver core is coming over as well. So plenty of weapons to work with and even more resources. So it all sounds awesome on paper, but North Texas and its players were not playing against Power 4 defenses last season. So we'll have to wait and see how they produce at this level. They are going to have to prove it, though, because we saw North Texas offense get slowed down last season against better competition like Tulane, Washington State, Western Michigan. And the O-line is completely being retooled as well. So there is just so much change and unpredictability, but hopefully the new unit is far more productive and has fewer turnovers. Now, I have made the mistake of discounting G5 players playing in a major conference before, when Curt Cignetti used that same strategy to bring over those James Madison players to Indiana. So I'm not going to be doing the same thing here, although I would be surprised if anybody had the same success doing it as Cignetti did. But like I said, it can't get worse for the Cowboys. On defense, Oklahoma State is relying less on the portal, which is also why it's the more questionable side of the ball, which kind of feels odd to say, but we know the offense will be fast and hopefully high scoring, but can the defense hold up? Well, it'll be former North Texas DC's job to ensure that they do. They have some solid guys returning, and then, of course, the North Texas guys getting injected in. I really like the linebacker core, and I actually like the size and talent they brought into bolster that D-line group that were not from North Texas, but still, I worry about the pass rush, the run defense, and the fact that, once again, a lot of G5 players are playing on this defense. On paper, North Texas had the second best pass defense in the country, but that's mostly because everyone that they played ran the ball so effectively that they didn't have to throw the ball. Hopefully that's not an issue this season. Hopefully they can stop the run. But at the end of the day, Oklahoma State has lost a lot of depth to the portal, but the starting guys should be really solid. I'm expecting an even better version of last year's North Texas team, but is that good enough to compete in this conference? We'll see. But I think that it is. And I think that they will be one of the most improved teams in college football, if not the most improved team in college football from last season. I do not think that they will be the best in the conference, obviously, or anything like that, but they will give teams a run for their money. At number 7, I have Kansas State. And last year, many people, myself included, expected a lot more from the Wildcats. We all expected Avery Johnson to have a lot more success in his first year starting, considering all the potential that he has, but he just never lives up to the hype. And Kansas State, they made some big changes. First of which is hiring Colin Klein at head coach, which the prodigal son returns. Obviously, he's an incredible fit for the Wildcats. He has already coached in Manhattan as the OC the year that Kansas State won the conference and the same year that we saw the best out of Avery Johnson. Then he left to be the OC at Texas A&M, which I think he did an incredible job there. But now he's back home to be the head coach of the Kansas State Wildcats. There's no question that Klein is an incredible OC, but is he a good head coach? Time can tell. Offensively, he brought over Missouri's quarterback coach, Sean Gleason, as the OC, which honestly was an interesting hire to me because I didn't really think that he did a great job with the quarterbacks that Missouri had last season. But I also, know that there was so much, injury in that room. So I also don't know a lot about what goes into being a quarterback coach. So he may have the skills to be an OC. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt there because I do really think that Colin Klein is a great offensive mind, so I'm going to trust him there. I really don't think we will see the offensive style change too much anyways. Klein knows what works at Kansas State, although I do expect more consistency there. Again, the last time we saw Avery Johnson lived up to that potential was when Klein was the OC, so there's a lot of optimism there that he can, bring in Klein and allow Johnson to finally break through as a starter. And we know that Klein was able to do, some great things with Marcel Reed, so hopes are really high that he can have that same success with Johnson. And I really like the running backs they have this season. Joe Jackson is back. Rodney Fields from Oklahoma State will be joining him in the backfield, as well as Jay Harris from Oregon. Great depth, great talent there. And there are solid pass catchers too. I actually really like the guys they brought in there. The offensive line has some guys to replace, but they are usually really good at reloading at that position, so I expect nothing less this season. They have some really good size. I like the upside they have there. And I have a lot of optimism about this offense and, them being able to scale as a whole, being a lot better than they were last season. My major question is the defense. Klein brought over DC Jordan Peterson from Texas A&M, and he has had some really nice transfers to work with here to improve immediately on that side of the ball. The new pass rushers should be great. They should have some great corners, and I expect a lot more takeaways, although I'm concerned about their ability to stop the run. The starting 5 up front seems fine as is, but there really isn't a lot of depth there, which is concerning, and some of the losses they had really hurt, even if they did do a great job of backfilling through the portal. Overall, I do think Kansas State will be a better product this season than they were last season, even with it being year 1 for Klein as a head coach. I think the stage is set for him to hit the ground running. At number 6, I have Utah. And Utah had a pretty interesting offseason. They pushed out Kyle Whittingham out for a younger Morgan Scalley, which kind of felt odd to me after the successful season that Whittingham had this past season. I think that the legendary coach deserved to have more job security past one bad year, especially if he redeems that the next year. So I think Utah made a pretty big mistake forcing Whittingham out. It feels pretty similar to Florida State pushing Bobby Bowden out for Jimbo Fisher, although I guess Jimbo did go on to win a national title, so who knows. But what I do know is that a good chunk of the players that followed Whittingham to Michigan and will not be playing on this Utah roster this season, but they did retain their monster quarterback, Devon Dampier, who's arguably the best quarterback in the Big 12, and they are lucky enough to have Bird Ficklin as the backup, who is a starting quarterback in his own right, I think. So that kind of depth at the quarterback position cannot be understated. They also have their leading rusher in Wayshawn Parker returning at running back, so an incredible backfield, but the entire O-line is gone. So definitely questions up front. There's optimism behind the guys they got from the portal, but replacing your entire front is tough. Even if the guys are good, there's no telling how they will gel or pan out. So even though Utah is usually pretty stout up front and known for being a pretty physical team, this is a new era. So we will see if they can reload like they have in the past. And the front isn't the only players that are gone either. They lost some receiving options. They replaced them with some transfer portal guys as well. They brought in new OC who brought some players over from Utah State. For me, I'm not too worried about the weapons that they have. Honestly, I actually have a lot of confidence in what they brought in, what they kept. But the offensive line is a big question mark for me and will really decide the trajectory of their season. Defensively, though, they lost a lot of players here as well. Some falling Whittingham to Michigan and others leaving naturally. Plus, with Scally moving up from the DC position to head coach, there had to be a replacement at DC. The previous linebacker coach fills that role, so there is some consistency there. I am a bit concerned about the defensive side of the ball for Utah overall, though. They are replacing almost all their linemen up front and most of the secondary. Just a lot of turnover and too much leniency on the portal, even if I like the individual players that they got. Overall, Utah looks on paper to have done as good of a job as you can when you're a head coach who's a legendary coach, just transitions out. They kept some consistency system-wise with the coach moves being internal, but there is just a lot to replace in the trenches and on both sides of the ball in the secondary, like I said. And I think Whittingham is just too good of a coach to believe that Utah is better off without him. So I think it's more likely that Utah is worse than they were last season than better, and I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if they slip quite a bit, but I am choosing to believe that they will only regress slightly because Scally will maintain that culture and the expectations that Whittingham left behind. And again, having such a good backfield helps. Utah is probably the most interesting team for me right now in the conference going into the season. Breaking our top five, at number 5, we have Arizona. And Brent Brennan had some hot seat conversations going into last season, despite only being with the Wildcats for 1 year. But I was not on that train. I knew Brent Brennan was a good coach, and last season he proved that to the college football world by going from 4-8 to 9-4. And I think that he will get another successful season from Arizona, despite losing a good chunk of the guys. I think that they have some really good guys that are returning and some good transfers coming in as well. But the most important name is Noah Fafita. He is coming back at quarterback. Brennan was adamant coming into last season that the down year Fafita had was due to injury and that he would step up and shine again in 2025, and he did. So I have every reason to believe that the experienced quarterback will be a beast once again. He took some major steps last year to be a better quarterback, and I think that he will be an even better version this season. I think combining him with the wide receivers they have will lead to a very successful passing attack. I generally like the weapons they have there. I do think that they need someone to step up at running back if they want to take that team to the next level, but as it stands, the ground attack is solid at best. Luckily, they have a quarterback that can use his legs as well to get some yards and, make plays happen. But last year we saw them play really physical football. The O-line can block if the O-line can block for their guy and play similarly physical. I think there's a lot to like about what this offense has to offer. My main concern, though, is that Arizona can't replace the guys they lost on defense, particularly in the secondary. Me personally, I think we will definitely see some regression there. I think that they did what they could to bring in some guys to help, but I just don't think that we will see the same production we saw last season. But I do like the DC that they have there. So even though the roster provides some questions, I do trust what he can do with what he has. So I really don't think that we are going to be getting as good of a defense as we saw last year or as good of a team as we saw last year, but I don't think they will fall off a cliff either. So overall, I love the staff. I love the offense a lot, even if there are some questions up front and on the ground. But the defensive portal additions are going to need to hit for them to take the next step. If they don't, the secondary could be a pretty big problem for the Wildcats. At number 4, I have Arizona State, and I know that's kind of a shock to some people, but 2 years ago, Arizona State was picked to finish last in the Big 12 under Kenny Dillingham, but they had other plans and won the conference and were a rough out in the playoffs. This year, a lot of people are down on Arizona State again, but I am not falling for it. I mean, no one's putting them at the bottom of the conference, but a lot of people aren't giving them the respect they deserve. Kenny Dillingham has earned my trust and respect, and I'm going to not fade them because everyone else is. I know they lost Sam Levitt. I know they lost Jordan Tyson, but I trust the evaluation and development squad at Arizona State. I mean, nobody expected Sam Levitt to break out like he did at Arizona State. So they bring in Cutter Boley from Kentucky, who we've already seen play really well in the SEC. I don't think he's getting enough credit there. I think that he will be awesome for the Sun Devils. And they bring in Colorado's number 1 receiver, Amarian Miller, who I think is being overlooked as well. And they brought in Reed Harris from Boston College at receiver. So sure, I don't exactly know what we're going to see on the ground from them. And the talent they brought in is probably still not going to fill these shoes that Jordan Tyson is leaving, especially when you factor in that their second leading pass catcher and tight end, Mateer, is also gone. But The specific pieces on the offense, sure, they're not as good as the talent roster they had last year, but last year they were dealing with some pretty intense injuries at major positions, and they were still successful. And I'm very interested to see how this less talented roster can stack up if they have the benefit of health that last year's team did not. As for defense, I expect Arizona State to take a speed over strength approach, which is how they have been approaching it under Dillingham the past few years, which has led to solid success. It's a style of defense that wouldn't work in a conference like the Big Ten or the SEC, but is a lot more successful here in the Big 12. So I'm pretty much expecting a similar production levels for them on that side of the ball, even if they do lose some guys. I think they continue to be solid, but not dominant on that side of the ball. Overall, I think they're going to surprise some people this season. Again, me having them this high is a vote of confidence in Kenny Dillingham. I think that if the key pieces are healthy, he can squeeze a lot of production out of the roster they have. I think that you will see a lot of guys maximize on their potential, and I think that there are some names on the roster that will step up in a big way that nobody, including myself, are expecting right now at this current moment. At number 3, I have Houston, and it took a year to get the gears turning, but Willie Fritz had Houston humming last season, finishing with a 10-3 season. I knew Willie Fritz was going to get it done at Houston. He's an incredible coach that wins everywhere he goes, and I think that things are just getting started here for the Cougars. They bring back experience, talent, and depth, and I think they are absolutely in the Big 12 title hunt this season. The offense is full of experienced skill position players and an offense that seems to have been elevated through the portal. Connor Wigman is back at quarterback. He was very productive last season, and I expect he'll be very productive again this season, again, if he can stay healthy. Plus, they have a very talented true freshman that may see some playing time here, so keep an eye out for that. The wide receiver room is loaded thanks to some transfer portal additions. They got a stud running back in the portal in Mekhi Hughes, who Willie Fritz originally recruited whenever he was at Tulane. He wasn't a factor at Oregon last year, but I trust Willie Fritz has a plan for him along with the other talented backs they have there. So the question is the transfer-filled O-line. They got some great pieces, but we have to see them gel and work together well before we can make a true judgment. There are a lot of transfers on the defensive side of the ball. Again, I like the pieces they got, but we have to see how they pan out. I have high hopes for the D-line, the linebackers, and the safeties, but I have my concerns about the pass rush and the corners especially. Despite all the transfers, though, I have a lot of faith in Willie Fritz and what he's building for the Cougars. At number 2, I have BYU. Kalani Sitake has had the Cougs soaring for the past few years, crushing everyone's expectations, including my own. I know that after Jake Retzlaff was kicked off the team last year, I expected them to fall off the cliff, and that did not happen. Bear Buckmeyer came in out of nowhere and led the team to an incredible season where their only loss came to Texas Tech in the regular season, and then Texas Tech once again in the conference championship game. They were even right outside the playoff bubble, so I'm not going to fade them again this year. I have gained a lot of respect for Sitake as a coach. I almost had them at number 1, and I think that they are going to have another really strong season. This legendary quarterback they have, Bear Buckmeyer, is back after a full season of experience under his back. Breakout star running back in 2025 Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, LJ Martin. He's also back. He was, like I said, the best running back in the conference last year and probably will be again. Those are 2 excellent anchors in the backfield, and I think the offensive line is going to be really good again despite losing 3 starters. They had made some really good portal moves, some really solid talent coming in. They just always seem to have toughness and grit to them, which is pretty rare within a conference where a lot of teams prioritize speed over strength, like I talked about with Arizona State. But the big question mark for BYU is the wide receiver room. They lost some great talent in Parker Kingston and Chase Roberts, and I don't think that the talent they have there is enough to fill those shoes as far as production, especially when you take into account they lost Carson Ryan at tight end as well. Luckily for BYU, though, I think that they will be good enough up front and in the backfield to lean on the ground game, even if the receivers don't step up. That's what they did most of the last season anyways. They ran the ball until they had to throw, and it worked wonderfully for them. And besides, I think they brought in some great talent at tight end and have some receivers with really a lot of potential, I think. So I don't think they're going to be completely incapable of throwing the ball, especially with Bear Buckmeyer at the helm. Defensively, though, BYU has been really good under Sitake, and that should be the case again this season. They have had pretty comparable roster to last season's unit, which, just suffocated teams. The major call-out is the loss of Jay Hill at DC. He was truly special for the Cougs, so time will tell what the impact of losing him will be. The special teams coach is taking over the defense, and he has a lot of good pieces to work with, so I'm expecting good things despite the departures they have. Overall, I expect we will see a BYU team that looks very similar to what we saw last season. I think they will be a run-heavy, physical team with a great defense. I still don't think they're going to stack up with the number 1 team on this list, but I also think they are very clearly better than the rest of the conference for now. And then at number 1, I think everyone in the country kind of has the same number 1 in the Big 12. That's Texas Tech. Brendan Sorsby is not a Red Raider anymore, and he will not be playing college football this season. For those who don't know, Sorsby is an elite transfer quarterback the Red Raiders brought in from Cincinnati, and he had some gambling issues, and there was some back and forth on whether he would or would not be allowed to play. But now we know that he won't be playing, and while that is a huge hit for the Red Raiders and will definitely hurt the team's national championship hopes, I still think they will continue to dominate the Big 12. I think that they have really separated themselves from the pack. They have the investment, the facilities, the resources that other teams in the conference just can't match. Last year, they had the most expensive transfer portal class in history, and it definitely showed on the field. They pretty much wiped the floor with every in-conference opponent other than Arizona State in a game where Texas Tech was missing their quarterback. But the quarterback that took over when Morton was out for injury is the same quarterback who will be starting this year, Will Hammond. And while he is no Brendan Sorsby, he is no pushover either. Don't forget that he led this team to a crushing 34-10 victory over Utah last season. And before Hammond tore his ACL, I don't think they would have even looked in the portal for a new quarterback. They had a lot of confidence in Hammond, so he is better than he's getting credit for. So this offense for the Red Raiders should remain among the best in the conference. I know that they lost some key players on both sides of the ball, but they are still at the top of the conference in returning production, and they once again killed it in the transfer portal, so they are not going anywhere. Their roster is not just great for Big 12 standards, it's great for any conference in the country. I really like this offensive line they have, especially compared to the rest of the conference. I think that they will have an excellent ground game. I'm sure that they will have some guys step up at receiver as well, even if a superstar hasn't emerged quite yet. My money is on Malcolm Simmons, and they just have a super balanced team. On defense, I would be surprised if they lost who they did and got better. And since Sorsby won't be there to elevate the offense like I originally expected, I do think overall Texas Tech will see some level of regression. But obviously, I don't think that regression will take them out of the top spot in the conference. I still expect them to go undefeated in a regular season, win the conference championship game, and make it into the playoffs. And depending on the matchup, maybe they win a game. Maybe they don't have to play Oregon this time. But without a quarterback like Sorsby, I do not see them making a title run. So that's going to do it for my Big 12 rankings. Let me know what you think in the comments, whether you liked it, hated it, whatever. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.